This is a Viva PR podcast.
You can't be a good reporter without strong relationships, and you can't be a good comms person without relationships. Telling a good story is about the impact on the people involved in that, not just PR, not just words, but genuinely part of my role was questioning everything and asking, well, where's your proof for that? But it's impossible not to do that. You can't turn your brain off at night. Sometimes your role is to step back and think, what's that one question that they're forgetting to ask?
Hello, welcome to PR in the Real World. I'm your host, Tony Garner, and today's guest, Sarah Keavney, has gone from the world of journalism through to an intense public sector communications environment to her current role where she's today leading the external comms at Manchester Metropolitan University. She's handled everything from the tragic death of a firefighter in service to the aftermath of the Manchester Arena attack, to running one of the most impactful public campaigns on violence against women and girls, the multi-award winning Is This OK? So from frontline emergencies to cultural change and long-term strategy, Sarah's career is a kind of masterclass in the human side of communications. It's powerful, deeply honest conversation. Here's Sarah.
Sarah, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So you started out as a reporter, and I'd be interested to know what kind of drew you into journalism in the first instance. What was the route?
Yeah. Well, I initially wanted to be a detective, actually.
Right.
I liked reading Nancy Drew. She was a child detective, so I liked reading those novels and really liked that idea of doing investigations. And as I got older, I got into English as a subject at school, really liked writing journals, doing, making newspapers and magazines. And I realised there was a world in which I could combine these things and write about crime and become a sort of a crime journalist. And then I got into the New Adventures of Superman. All my career aspirations were based on characters, it would seem. And specifically the Terry Hatchett era of Lois Lane. And I wanted to be Lois Lane.
Right. It's a bit of a look.
Yeah. So that was what I did. I wanted to be a journalist from a really young age, and I went and did it. So I loved the idea of knowing lots of things, having all the inside information, speaking to people, because I like chatting to people, finding things out. And the particular qualities of Lois Lane, I guess, which I really liked, were her sort of determination and tenacity, which I think are things that I've sort of had throughout my career. She just knew what she wanted and she went and got it. So, yeah, I went to do my degree at Manchester Metropolitan University, where incidentally I now work, and then went and did my NCTJ and became a journalist.
So where did you start? What it wasn't the Daily Planet?
Not quite, but I very quickly was at a daily newspaper. I started at the Bury Times, not so far from here. And within a few months, actually, we merged with the Bolton News, which is a daily newspaper. And that was it. Then I was working on a daily. And I did all sorts of interesting stories. But I always really liked the breaking news, the court reporting crime. I liked doing the features as well, did some fun stuff. I took part in a Guinness World Record attempt for the most Ferrero Rocher chocolates eaten in 1 minute.
Hang on a minute. Right. How many did you get?
This is a really embarrassing story. I'm not sure why I brought it up. The world record at the time, believe it or not, was 6.
Wow.
And I did about 2 in 1 minute. And I was up against 6 other people. A couple of them were firefighters, actually.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think I managed about 2, which was very, very pathetic. But I wrote a feature article on it, which actually is still available online, actually. And that was a fun thing to do. But yeah, as I say, I enjoyed doing the breaking stories. I liked doing the crime. I liked responding to a murder. It sounds awful, but I liked getting the story and doing those big stories.
What did your time at the Bury Times and Bolton News teach you? What were the kind of the big lessons that you took away from that and that live with you to this day?
There were 3 main ones, I guess. The first is just relationships and the importance of relationships. As you'll know from your time as a reporter, you can't be a good reporter without strong relationships, and you can't be a good comms person without relationships, trusted relationships, knowing who to go to and knowing that when you need them in a time of crisis, which is, often a lot of what you're doing in comms, that you've already got that trust built up. Secondly, it was, I guess, around resilience. So working on a daily, it was very fast-paced. every day you were working to a daily deadline where you had to get that story. You were doing shifts where you were working late at night and having to respond to breaking stories. I remember getting home once after a late shift about 11 and immediately have to go in and back out again because a little girl was missing. So working long shifts and dealing with difficult things and learning how to deal with that. And then thirdly, just around the impact of, the importance of human stories and impact. So, telling a good story is about the impact on the people involved in that and how you demonstrate that, and always putting the people at the heart of what you're doing.
Are there any kind of days that you remember in particular in that? I remember door knocks and they were not my favourite days at all. But and thinking back now, I was really young. I was like a teenager, and I was knocking on doors of people who had sadly lost their lives and the families there. You're put into a position of enormous responsibility at a young age.
Yeah, you are. I was in my early 20s, and I don't remember what the actual story was, but I remember the first door knock I did. I was sitting in my car and I rang my mum before I knocked on the door and sort of said, I'm doing this, and if you don't hear from me in like an hour, be worried. But you just get used to it, don't you, I suppose? And there's a couple of stories that stick in my mind where I've door knocked someone who've, in both cases, actually, they'd lost a daughter. And one of them was a young girl who died from a reaction to a curry after eating. She had a nut allergy. And that was absolutely devastating. Knocking on someone's door and asking them to talk to a complete stranger is terrifying. But actually, it helped them because I was able to give them that outlet to talk about what happened, to share awareness, to pay tribute to the girl. And it's so much so that when they had the inquest, the coroner actually referenced the story that I'd done and how it had helped the family process things. So that was quite a proud moment, actually, because something that's so horrific and something that's so difficult to do turned into a real positive, and gave me that push to keep going for a bit.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I had a similar situation. I think my first experience like that, I clearly must have been showing visible signs of whacking it. And our news editor at the time, a guy called Nick Dunn, took me to one side and said, look, nobody has ever planned for a day like this. You're just part of that process. And, you might give them an opportunity to talk and that they would, want to go with that in mind. And it's exactly what you've just described. So you went from newspapers to the Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service to join the comms team there. What was the attraction there then?
Yeah, I wanted a change, and I thought it was a natural step to go into PR and comms, and the fire service just seemed like the perfect option because it was newsy. It was doing the incidents, that sort of breaking news, emergency comms. So I went for it, and it was actually a bit of a risky move because it was a temporary role. I was covering someone's maternity leave, so I thought I'll give this a go, see how I feel, see if this is what I want to go into. And I was there for 14 years, so that clearly worked out for me. But we very much were treated ourselves a bit like a newsroom in those early days anyway, so it felt very, very familiar. We were sort of like journalists for the fire service. We were going out, getting stories. We were going speaking to families, not necessarily door knocking, but a similar approach of going getting them to speak to us. And so we very much treated it in the same way, and was working with former journalists and newsreaders and police press officers. So we all came together and set ourselves up a bit like that. We had a 24/7 rota. We responded to incidents. I had a full kit. It wasn't a fire kit, but it was similar. It was helmet, fully kitted out to be able to go to incident scenes and manage media at the scene, because that was a time when media did still flock to a scene, local media, and it was very early days of social media really taking off. So at that time we were able to control that content, capture our own content, give people behind the scenes footage and pictures from incidents, and yeah, it was a real buzz, actually.
Yeah, I mean, you've described when we were doing the pre-chat that it was like being part of a big family. Can you just expand on that? What do you mean? Was it certain in part because of the pressure that you were
Yeah.
under as well, that, you know, that brought you together.
Yeah, and it was quite intense because it was the comms team was a new team that had been sort of pulled together. We had a new director who brought along all different new people that had to come together and quite quickly build a new way of working, because it was a big change for the service. It previously had operational fire officers doing that role, so it was a really new thing to put civilians, if you like, into that role. So we had to prove that, and there was a lot of training that came with it. Lots of exercising where we were thrown into situations where we had to simulate a big incident and all work together. And then there were obviously the real incidents where we all pulled together. So we always had each other's backs. There was a comms team, we were very close. But beyond that, the service itself was very much like a family. There's some things that are really unique to the fire service, and it really does pull you together. And yeah, like I say, you go through some difficult things. And in a way, that the culture on a fire station of that really close-knit community, family, people who are working together, really closely together day in, day out through the night, that sort of replicated across the whole service, that feeling of coming together. And that has its challenges too. I mean, it's harder to pull away from that. It's really hard to say no. It's really hard to take a break when you need to.
Yeah.
But yeah, it did feel like that, and it made it hard to leave in the end when the time did come.
You're obviously were there during some very challenging periods for the fire service itself as well. I remember a particular really sad incident around a firefighter's death, and that must have affected both the people around him, but the wider team as well, and you'd have been part of that. And you're obviously there during the arena, and then that subsequent inquiry, which was a challenging time for the service. Can you talk about those two things?
Yeah, absolutely. We lost a firefighter, Stephen Hunt, in 2013 during a big incident in the city centre. Yeah, he sadly lost his life, and another firefighter that he was partnered with was very badly injured. And it was on a busy Saturday in the middle of Manchester. I wasn't actually on call that night. My colleague was, but very quickly I knew what was going to play out because of all that training that we'd done, because we had all those plans in place and we tested them. And my job, weirdly enough, was to stay away from it, because I knew that in that next day I'd be taking over, because the person who was on call would have worked through the night and needed a break. So I had to go to bed that night to sort of be rested for the next day. I'd actually been on a hen do, so I really did need to rest and get ready for taking over the next day, in which I did. Being in the office on a Sunday, all your team coming together and having to coordinate that. There's so much to consider, because it wasn't just about media and PR. Obviously, that was a big part of it. That was largely in hand. It was the internal impact. What do we do next? How do we communicate with our staff on Monday when they come back into work? Do we tell them before then? How do we break down those different audiences internally? We can't just treat staff as one audience. There's people who were on the firefighters' watch who obviously need to come first. There's then wider people in that borough, and then there's people who didn't know him but will feel impacted by it. And then there's thinking through the long term. So, what happens when we have to close the incident down? How do people pay their tributes? We opened up a book of condolence. And what happens when it's the anniversary? So, and the inquest, all these things you have to think about, the crisis, and then the incident's never just about that moment in time. There's always things to come. And obviously at the heart of all that was the family. And we developed a really lovely relationship with the family, actually, working very closely with them to make sure that they always found out things first, and everything was on their terms, but still having to have some quite difficult conversations with them. And that, it worked well in the sense that we were prepared and we knew how to deal with it, but it was a shock because I'd never experienced anything like that before. And the service hadn't for a long time. In fact, the industry hadn't for a long time. It's a very rare thing for a firefighter to die in the line of duty. So it attracted a lot of attention from the sector as well, wanting to know how we're dealing with it. And because of that family feeling, that ripples across the whole country. Everybody who's part of a fire service in the country felt connected to that. So there were so many different audience groups to think of. It was really difficult, and it went on for years. When we had the inquest, which I sat through most days, there was a sort of a criminal aspect alongside it, which we didn't come to anything in the end, but we were having to manage that and the reporting of that. Really, really challenging times.
And it must have been at the same time, while you're under so much pressure, and you're having to be empathetic to all these people, it must have been hard for you as a comms team to kind of like, keep smiling and keep professional and keep going.
Yeah, what you find is that those people who are in the service, they know that a terrible things happen, and their day-to-days move on. They've still got projects to deliver, and they need your support as comms. So they keep coming to you if they want the press release, they want the graphic design, they want the web page, and you have to sort of keep you cool, because really what you want to say is, one of our colleagues has just died. This is not a priority, but you've got to obviously be professional about that and understand that, yes, the service does still have to carry on as normal in some ways, and we do still have a job to protect the public. So it's a real balancing act. And that, I think, I found quite challenging, because I'm somebody who doesn't hide how I feel very easily. You can usually read on my face what kind of mood I'm in. And I've been told several times over the years that I needed to work on my poker face, which I like to think I have done over the years, but I was still fairly new then and young. And as I say, it was really hard to put on that poker face and be sort of, professional and keep those relationships whilst dealing with this really difficult thing. And it was also difficult to step away from it. That played out in many incidents over the years, but you don't want to miss out, because you're invested in this and you want to see it through. You want to play your part, and there's a commitment of just wanting to help. That fear of not being involved in something or missing an opportunity. So it's really hard to step away from that when you probably should do, because you need a break. And the team were really good at, and with all the different teams I've worked in, I've always been very supportive. You have to be, but it's just that natural instinct in me to want to just be involved in everything all of the time.
I think it's that reporter's instinct, and I get that. Can we turn then to the arena inquiry, and let's just go and remind people who might not be aware of what we saw.
So there was a terrorist attack at Manchester Arena on the 22nd of May 2017, and 22 people died, including children. It was a major multi-agency response. The fire service were one part of that obviously, but due to some issues with operational communications, the fire service were very late to show up, and actually, as it came out later in various reports and inquiries, in fact, I think the chair said they played no meaningful role in the incident that night, and that became apparent very quickly. So that was a major challenge. Alongside, at the time, we just moved across into the combined authority, so we were working with the Mayor of Greater Manchester, working with Manchester City Council to provide that civic response, putting the mayor up there on the town hall steps, addressing the country, and managing effectively working for three different, not organisations, but different elements of an organisation, with the fire service, the mayor, the CA, and working alongside the police. The night that it happened, it was a very late on a Monday night. I was in bed like most people were. It wasn't until the next morning that it became apparent, the severity of what had happened and the magnitude of what had happened. And again, very quickly then it became clear that we were going to have some reputational issues for the fire service, and lots of cultural issues internally that came off the back of that, and people feeling like they'd not been able to respond. There was two aspects. There was working with partners and the mayor on that civic response, thinking about again how the city region could pay their respects, thinking about that community cohesion side, how to make sure that wasn't impacted, how to get the city back up and running again, having marking appropriate moments at the train station where it happened, just underneath the arena. Lots of practical things like that, which were difficult to manage from a comms point of view. But on the fire side, we were managing a major crisis that ran for years and years, if I'm honest. It was the start of the unravelling of lots of issues that had been there for many years and not really been dealt with in terms of culture and leadership. And off the back of the arena incident and the lack of response from the fire service, the Mayor of Greater Manchester launched a root and branch review of the whole service, which included him visiting every single fire station. We had 42 at the time. He commissioned Sir Bob Kerslake to run an independent review. So it opened up years and years of things that had just not really been dealt with. And that was extremely difficult.
And working under that kind of scrutiny and that pressure must have been tricky as well.
Yeah, we'd never experienced that level of scrutiny before. Obviously, we had fire authority in the past and we had inspections, but it was a completely different level. And I always wonder what the transition to GMCA would have been like if that hadn't happened, because we, as a comms team, we moved from the fire service to combine with what was the Office of the Police and Crime Commission's team and the GMCA team to become one big sort of super comms team, if you like.
Yeah.
And it was really new. We were working with people we didn't know. We didn't know how this was going to work. We didn't know what the governance processes were going to be fully. And on top of that, personally, I just returned from maternity leave. So I had a 9-month-old baby at home and was getting 0 sleep on the best of days. And 2 weeks into that, this happened. So I always wonder, what it would have been like, coming together as a new team and what the next few years would have been like if that hadn't happened. But it did. And yeah, that scrutiny from the Mayor, scrutiny from the media, from our own staff, wanting to know what happened, what went wrong, why as a firefighter in Manchester wasn't I able to respond to that, and what can we do to make sure that never happens again, which was what we did over the next few years up into the inquiry that started in September 2020 and lasted for a couple of years. So yeah, so much scrutiny. And the HMIC FRS is
right, it's a mouthful.
Yeah, and the inspectorate had come and given us a cause for concern, which is it's like being put in special measures, if you like. You get extra scrutiny for not having a marauding terrorist attack capability up and running. And this was after some of the learnings from the arena. So once we thought we'd got to a position where we were ready, the inspectorate said we weren't. So we were still, and that was 2021. So many years after, we still weren't where we needed to be. So it was a very long running process. That
you talked earlier about resilience, that your Bury Times experience gave you that. But how do you crises like that long running element must kind of chip away a little bit at that resilience for anyone, especially someone like yourself who, Lily, like you said, wears your heart on your sleeve.
I must admit, I've not really spoken about the arena attack ever, really, other than individually to people. And I'm not sure why, because it's not, it didn't have that direct of an impact on me, but it consumed my working life for many, many years. And it was so close to home. So, it really did affect me. And especially when we came to the inquiry, the pressure to show that we'd made improvements, and that to be genuine, foolproof, not just PR, not just words, but genuinely part of my role was questioning everything and asking, well, where's your proof for that? Where's your evidence? I need a case study. I need the data. Because we couldn't find ourselves in that position again where we were not able to demonstrate that we'd made those improvements so long after. So that my role became more about being that reporter, if you like, asking those difficult questions and really digging deep to be able to surface anything that might come back and bite us. And the other aspect of that was moving the organisation and the leadership to that genuine, a genuine apology for what happened, genuine humility, and genuine improvement. So again, it's not just that PR spin of we're going to say we're going to make improvements, then we all move on. We genuinely worked hard for years to do that, and we had a leader who was willing to show that humility and a bit of vulnerability, which is something we've seen more and more recently with crisis comms response. But it wasn't always the case. That moved to a real openness. From a resilience point of view, yeah, as I say, I find it difficult to talk about. It makes me really sad. And I think I'll always be sad about the arena attack and Stephen Hunt's death and other things that happened. I'll never forget them. But in a way, I think that's sort of what makes you good at your job, because you care, and you can't not care in that situation. You want to do your best for everybody involved. I think I'd say people will say to you in your job, don't take it home with you. But it's impossible not to do that. You can't turn your brain off at night. And also in the world we work in now, where you work in hybrid, so you're physically at home a lot of the time, you can't walk away from it. So it's about learning how to process it at the end of the day. What are those techniques for just taking that moment to go for a walk and process what you've been through that day, and realizing that what you're dealing with isn't normal. I think you get into that mindset of, oh, this is just the way it is, and you get used to how to react. You go on automatic pilot, the adrenaline kicks in, you know what to do. But actually, that's not most people's day to day. And seeing people dying in fires, car crashes, all sorts of terrible incidents, gas explosions involving children, it's not normal stuff. And I really, now I'm not in that industry, it's quite, it's nice not seeing that day in, day out. But as I say, you've just got to step away from it and remember that it isn't normal. And what I found really helpful was the fire service comms family, if you like. So there's a brilliant network called FirePro, which is a national network that all fire service comms people could come together, and they do some amazing stuff. And I'm sure other sectors have the same kind of thing, but it really was really useful to be able to just call up somebody and just chat through, how did you deal with this? And
they could properly empathise.
That's it, because it's not the kind of thing that you can talk to your family about it, but they just don't really understand it. And you don't see what goes on the inside. You see the media response, all that internal stuff that you're dealing with. People don't see that. So finding your networks who understand the specifics and the uniqueness of what you're going through, and using them and not being afraid to pick up the phone is really helpful. And because they will need that back from you at some point. So, so do that.
That's a good segue into my next question, really, which was around the people who've helped you in your career at different times, and who are those people who've given you the strength, or the bits of advice that you've taken along the way. If you don't want to name check anyone and embarrass them,
I probably won't name check anybody through fear of leaving somebody out and offending them, because there's been lots. The original fire comms team we had that was set up when I first joined the service in 2011 was very special. All the people in that team and our director were shaped me as a comms person, and were very special in lots of different ways. And I learned most of what I went on to do from those people in those initial days. So they were special people, special mentors who taught me a lot. In fact, it was that director who told me that I should work on my poker face, which I just laugh about now, because actually what I realised over the years was actually I do to a certain extent, but I actually battled for quite a while with that. Like, how do I be myself whilst being professional? And actually I came to realise that, it's okay. I can say what I think. And I worked with the last fire chief that I worked with was similar. He was very open and honest, and in a safe space, in an appropriate situation. And actually that taught me that showing your feelings, and again, within reason, and being open and being upset by things that happen, all those kind of things, are normal, and they're not a weakness. In fact, they can be a strength. So that piece of advice has stayed with me, but it's not necessarily because I've taken it as it was meant. But that was interesting. I've been told a lot to trust my gut, and that seems a bit of an obvious one, but sometimes you doubt that gut. And again, in comms, sometimes your role is to step back and think, what's that one question that they're forgetting to ask? Sometimes it's really obvious, but if you've got this gut feeling that you're thinking, I just need to ask the question here. Like, it can be something as simple as, are you actually trying to achieve? Or how will this land with X audience? It's being that person to ask those questions. And often that's just a gut feeling that you get from having that reporter instinct. So trusting your gut in asking the right questions and making decisions.
That's a really good one. It was a completely different scenario upstairs last week where the team were discussing something and there was no wrong or right answer. But one of my colleagues said to me, Tony, just go with your gut. Go with your whatever you. And as soon as that landed, I knew what to do, and it unblocked everything.
Yeah, obviously you've got to have some situations require the evidence and data behind that. Sometimes it's a case of you know what your gut is, and then you have to go backwards to find the research and the evidence to prove that. But you generally can't go wrong.
You move to the combined authority, the role expands, and then you did an amazing campaign, violence against women and girls. Tell us about that and how the idea came about and what was involved.
Yeah, so in 2021 we launched our Is This Okay campaign. It was something that we've been discussing for a while. It was the year that Sarah Everard was murdered. There were obviously lots of other women murdered by men. Sabina Nessa was one that was in the news as well. And Greater Manchester launched a consultation on our gender-based violence strategy, which was a 10-year plan of what we were going to do to tackle gender-based violence against women and girls perpetrated by men and boys. And part of that was long-term public engagement to essentially change behaviour and change the attitudes that underpin the violence against women and girls, which is, essentially based on societal attitudes and inequalities. Yeah. So we've been talking about what we could do. The Mayor of Greater Manchester wanted to lead this campaign, be the face of the campaign, because he wanted to talk to men and boys specifically. We'd seen lots of PR campaigns around victims, but nothing so much that spoke directly to men and boys about those lower level behaviours that were just the norm, the street harassment, wolf whistling, that kind of thing. So we'd been talking about it and coming up with a few different ideas, and then very quickly it became this needs to happen in the next 4 weeks.
Seriously?
The mayor appeared live on Sky News talking about violence against women and girls. I think it was around the time of the White Ribbon Day. So we were talking about it. It was in the news again, and he stood up and said, yeah, we've launched this gender-based violence strategy in Greater Manchester, and soon we're going to be launching a major campaign. That was my 4-week deadline.
Over to you.
So, as you know, Tony, from working in PR agency, campaigns are like that often take months and months and quite a big budget. We didn't have either of those things. But what we did have was some amazing networks and groups in Greater Manchester that we could tap into. There was lots of existing research and insight that we could use. And essentially, this was the start of a conversation. So it was a video we wanted to create to get people talking that we could then use to, from the video itself, gather insight about people's reactions and use that to inform a much bigger campaign that we would look to do the next year. So it was giving us a bit of time to do that as well. So, yeah, like I said, 4 weeks, minimal budget. There wasn't a great deal to look at from partners around that time. The only thing that was similar that came out as we were making our film was Police Scotland launched Don't Be That Guy.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, that was really big. That was really successful. They actually spent months and months and lots of money making that, I believe. But anyway, it wasn't a competition. But he did put the pressure on us a bit because suddenly we weren't now the only ones doing this. But we used some insight that we'd got from a UN survey, which revealed 71% of women of all ages in the UK had experienced some form of sexual harassment in a public space. And for 18 to 24-year-olds, this rose to 86%. So it's really, really shocking, actually. And we realised that public space, low-level behaviour was what we needed to work on. So we commissioned a video agency who did their own Snap survey and got some more insight from that. Of those women that they spoke to, 80% had experienced catcalling, 75% had experienced comments such as "you should smile more." And when you watch the video, you'll see that similar kind of comment is thrown out at the woman. 75% had experienced groping in public, and 72% had experienced wolf whistling. So really, really high numbers, and they were from more local women in Greater Manchester.
Can I just interrupt you and ask if you were shocked by that level as a young woman yourself?
No, not at all. All of those things are things that I've sort of experienced, and that's why one of the reasons why I loved working on this campaign. I was so passionate about it, and also I've got 2 young girls who are going to grow up into this world, and anything I could do to make that better was I wanted to be right at the forefront of that. So no, I wasn't shocked at all. But we knew that they were still shocking.
Yes, yeah. So sorry, I interrupted you. You were producing this video.
Yes. So it needed to land with both men and women, which again was a difficult balance. So we had to work with different groups. We worked with women's charities who worked with women who experienced domestic abuse or any form of violence against women and girls. We worked with men's charities as well, who worked with male perpetrators, to just work out how the best way to make it land with them was. It was really interesting that actually, because a conversation with them made us realise that we needed to leave the audience questioning and challenging themselves, and not essentially that they were being told off. There was a lot of narrative around men being told off and, it's all men type approach. So that's how we got to the "is this okay" with question at the end of the video and the name of the campaign, because it's a rhetorical question, so that's why it was a bit of a play on the title, because obviously it's not okay, but we wanted the male audience to ask, well, is it okay? Because actually it doesn't look like it is when I've seen it escalate in this way. Women's groups didn't want the woman in the video to be come across as helpless and vulnerable. So again, that was a real balance. How would you show what she's experiencing without her coming across as vulnerable or angry? Because whichever way, again, there's a backlash.
Yeah.
And those conversations led to changes in the video through various stages. We got lots of insight back through the consultation on the strategy, as well as through the focus groups with the women, that they really wanted to see something around taking photos of girls in the street without their consent and comment on social media. So we worked that into the video.
So we'll put the video into the show notes, but just describe it for us, for people who haven't seen this campaign. But if you haven't, it's a brilliant one. You should check it out.
Yeah, it's about 90 seconds, and it starts with a young girl who is looking at the camera. She's just tying a shoelace. She's getting to go for a run. And she experiences some boys taking pictures of her and sort of catcalling her as she's running. Someone comes up a bit close to her. And again, he's not doing anything that you would probably think is wrong, but it's that making her feel uncomfortable, walking very close to her. She goes to a coffee shop and a man brushes past her and just touches her on her waist. She is on a night out, and this lad shouts at her, "Oh, give us a smile." And his is the last comment that she receives, and it sort of escalates a bit, starts to get a little bit angry in his tone. And it's a series of interactions that she experiences throughout her normal day that to each of it, to take them individually, seem like quite low level. But when you see them happening throughout the day, and it builds up into an escalation at the end, where the sound and the music of the video really sort of rises, and you start hearing wolf whistling coming in and catcalling and all those phrases that as a woman we've heard before all come in and sort of overwhelm her with having to experience all these things and just going about her day to day. And she just turns to the camera and says, "Do you think this is okay?" And the answer is obviously, well, no, it's not, but that's how we left it. And then it flashes up some of those key stats that I talked about at the beginning. And we knew it was really powerful. I shiver now watching it still, because when we first watched, I watched various edits of it and changed it along the way. And the ending where she asked that question, we filmed dozens of versions of her saying those words to make sure we got the tone absolutely right, to get that balance that we've discussed before. And glad that we picked I think we picked the right one in the end. And then we had a PR package wrapped around that. We launched it with our stakeholders first on our board, our Violence Against Women and Girls board in Greater Manchester, who became real advocates for sharing that in their own spaces. But it went a bit viral, as they say.
Go on. What were the numbers?
Right. So after within that day, I'll tell you this and then I'll come back to that. That day, I was getting messages by lunchtime to say it's got over 1 million views. This was totally organic. We spent nothing on paid for social or any paid for. All we spent money on was the production of the video. So I was thinking, oh, this is getting big. And again, a bit of a side note, that week that we launched that video, we'd also had that terrible HMIC inspection that I mentioned where it said that we still weren't prepared as a fire service to deal with terror attacks effectively. That was the day before. That night, whilst I was working to finalise the campaign, I got a phone call with some terrible news about one of our fire officers who'd passed away, taken his own life, actually. So I was dealing with that as well. So major crisis. And then I had to put on a front and go and present this campaign to our board and then launch it with the mayor. So bit of a side note, but I had no voice that day. I was so tired and run down and emotionally drained. And I just thought it was worth saying that because you don't see that. You see the video. I've talked about the video in a few different places in the campaign and I'm really proud of it and it's won awards, but most people don't know what was going on in the background that week. But yeah, after a few months, those views totted up to over 5 million views on Twitter alone.
Right.
140,000 views across other channels. There were 42,000 mentions of the hashtag Is This Okay? And interestingly, it was a real split between men and women who were viewing the video. There was slightly more women, 56%. The rest were all men. And again, it was great to have all those views, but if that was just women going, yes, this happens to me, we weren't getting that message across. So it was interesting to see that we were getting that response. Yes. And it wasn't just in the views, it was the comments. The comments that we got were really positive from male audiences sharing it in their own channels saying, come on, lads, we've got to do something about this. And that was like, we couldn't have asked for more.
Did you have to monitor it and did it take on a life of its own or did you get, men going, this isn't right?
Yeah, we did. And it's inevitable. But I would say it policed itself because
right.
The response, if someone put on a negative response, immediately somebody would come back and just say, well, they're not saying that, are they? If you watched it and, think about it from this point of view. And they just challenged each other. And when we saw subsequent stages of the campaign over the years that followed, we started to use TikTok more because at the time we didn't use that as a channel. And again, that was a bit of a worry that we would see a bit of a pushback on TikTok, but we didn't. It had they went on to have the same kind of response in that self-policing. So that was really, really interesting. And of course, it got national and international coverage. There's quite a lot of coverage in Australia because in Australia, they're doing a lot of work around violence against women and girls. They were seen as one of the leaders globally. And actually, there are 3 places in the world that are sort of seen as leaders in this space at the time. One was in America, one was Victoria in Australia, and the other was Greater Manchester. So
a couple of weeks ago, and sat in that very chair that you're in was one of our friendly experts, Steph Bridgman, who's all about measurement. And she was talking about vanity metrics versus sanity metrics. And basically the point was, great having big numbers, but did you have any impact? So drum roll, please, Sarah.
As I said, the aim of that bit of the campaign was to start the conversation, which we absolutely did, and all of the stats backed that up. And we got asked to talk about it in all sorts of forums. The mayor did so much media coverage. So we got the conversation started, and it then led us to a bigger campaign the next year, and that's where we started to see the real impact. So the next phase was much bigger. That followed a year after. We had a lot more time and some budget behind this. And this ran for a year. We got a bit more targeted in who we were aiming the campaign at. So we were going for men and boys aged 18 to 35 specifically. And we focused more on bystander theories. So we were giving more advice through telling the story of what peers can do, so calling each other out type thing and having those open conversations. And this saw a film series, so a 3-part series of, again, a girl that's been followed, and how she goes back to talk about that to her housemate who's male, and he kind of realizes, wow, that's not okay. And he talks to his friend who's sending her dodgy messages and says, like, look, mate, this isn't okay. And we had a podcast series as well. And from those bits of content, we were able to do a full campaign. So a few more big numbers before I get onto the impact. They again had over 4 million views of that content on social media, and we did a massive out of home advertising campaign with this phase that we didn't have previously. We had ads all across Greater Manchester that generated 9.4 million opportunities to be seen. And we also went into big events. So we went to Freshers' Fairs. We had it shown at the Parklife Festival. So it was seen there by all those people. And we did a pre and post campaign survey. So we did it obviously before the campaign to get the baseline figures, and afterwards, 400 men and boys aged 18 to 35 in Greater Manchester. So our specific target audience, plus some focus groups with men and some separate focus groups with women as well, just to see how it was landing with them. Over half of the respondents to that survey, 54%, had seen at least one of the campaign materials. Over half, so 53%, had said the campaign had made them think, feel, or want to do something different as a result, which was the key one for us.
Yeah.
And more than 11% that had engaged with gender-based violence behaviours before or found them acceptable said that they thought that gender-based violence towards women and girls was a problem when compared with the baseline survey. So really good figures, not, at the massive end of in terms of percentages, but as we've always said, it's, and I'm not going to see this through to the end, it's a long-term campaign over the next 10 years. So for our first major campaign and survey, we were really, really pleased with those results.
You're making people think, aren't you? And changing behaviour is like you say, it's a long-term effort. But you must be really proud when you look back at that campaign. Particularly, mate, I wasn't aware of everything that was going on in the background. I just saw. I remember seeing you picking up award after award one night in Manchester.
Yeah, no, it was Yeah, I was very proud. I got contacted by all sorts of people wanting to speak to me as being behind the campaign. I was like, I just led on it. I didn't produce the video, and I kind of didn't really know how to react to that. As you know, Tony, from doing this is way out of my comfort zone. I am behind the scenes. I don't want to put myself out there. And then I didn't, and I couldn't, because I needed to rest and recuperate that week. So I didn't take up those opportunities. But yeah, it generate a lot of attention. And the other thing, just to say on measurement, is often with these kind of behaviour change things in fire service comms, policing comms, in local authority comms, when they're doing all sorts of behaviour change campaigns, really important stuff, you want to see an impact on the incidents. But this was really hard to measure because they were the type of incidents that people weren't reporting. In fact, when you go back to those UN survey figures, around 90% of women who had experiences hadn't reported them. So you can't track that. No one's going to report a wolf whistle. Well, and there were, obviously they escalate, but the element of it was really, really difficult. So we haven't been able to do that. But the campaign's moved on now to tackling more of that serious end behaviours. So domestic abuse and coercive control. It's got a lot more targeted. And in time, they hope to see a reduction in those kind of incidents, or an increase in reporting, which shows that people are seeing that it's a problem.
That's brilliant. Well, fair play to you anyway for, leading a great campaign like that. Shall we move forward then to today? Yeah. So a few months ago, you left the Combined Authority and went back to your alma mater, Man Met, to join the comms team there. Tell us about the role that you're doing and what was the jumping off point? Why did you decide to make the move at this point?
So my current role is Head of External Communications at Manchester Met Uni. And it's been really refreshing to be able to focus on external comms, actually. So I've got a team of 10 and we cover news and PR and run the press office. We do public affairs and stakeholder engagement and community engagement with our local communities as well. And after all those years juggling all the different comms disciplines, it's been really nice to be able to just dive a bit deeper into those specific areas. And that is one of the reasons why I left my other job. I'd been there a very long time. I'd been a bit worn down, if I'm honest, by the incidents and the crises. It did take its toll, and I think a lot of that's just down to time and just getting to a point where there's only so many times you can do that, not being particularly good at stepping away from it, having a young family, and just wanting to try something else. That is the bottom line, just wanting to try something else. I liked the idea of doing something different but similar, so still kind of got that public sector feel. You're still talking about in terms of PR, talking about how you're helping people's lives, because yes, we're there to get bums on seats in terms of students, but we're also there to give opportunities to students. So we're changing their lives for the better, and I've experienced that firsthand from that university in particular. And we're doing a lot of work at the moment around widening participation for students who otherwise might not have considered university as a route because maybe funding. So we give out lots of scholarships. We're introducing new scholarships to give people a chance, lots of programmes. And we're a dual intensive university, so that means we put as much on our research as we do on our education. So again, we're changing lives through the research that we're doing. So for me, it's always been about that real purpose of what my job is and finding that connection to how are we helping people. And I didn't think I thought that would be a struggle to find. And that's why I probably stayed where I was as long as I did. But actually, I've really genuinely found that in this job, which has been really nice, because I don't think I expected to when I talked about going to work for a university.
Oh, that's good. No, that's really good. I mean, one of the things that you said that attracted you, that I was interested in, that you've got more time to look at proactive campaign planning and using the models that you talked about. Whereas obviously in the fire service, you do an element of proactive, but there's an awful lot of kind of reactive work as well that you're involved in.
Yeah, so people say that you should in comms to have 80% should be proactive work and 20% is reactive, and it was absolutely the other way around in fire service and GMCA comms. It was, and again, as I've said, some of that I quite liked. I thrived off that, but you learn things in your comms career and you don't often get a chance to put them into practice. So it's been really nice to go and flip that round now. So yes, I would say, maybe not quite 80, 70% is proactive. And I've really been able to embed robust comms planning, use the OASIS framework that we all learn about, but as I say, don't often get to use. And I've really embedded that actually across the team and trying to work more collaboratively, with internally with marketing teams and alumni comms and with our partners in the city region, and to get the best out of every situation. And we're trying to look at things through and we are trying to just be really strategic about how we build profile and reputation. So looking at that through sort of 4 key pillars. So research, how do we demonstrate the impact of our research, and what are the proof points to that, and what do we actually want to be known for? So we do so much amazing research, we can't talk about all of it, obviously. What do we want to be known for, and how are we going to do that, and who do we want to speak to about that? And then being a great place to work. So how do we support attracting the right talent through building our external communications? The third one is education. So supporting student recruitment, but also demonstrating that we're an excellent provider of education. And then the 4th sort of pillar of our brand and profile sort of strategy is contribution to place. So how do we, as a university, how are we contributing to
wider,
as in regional, as in very locally, so from a community point of view, regionally in terms of Greater Manchester and the work that the CA is doing in terms of the Greater Manchester strategy, and the region doing so well in terms of building growth, economic growth. But then nationally, in terms of national economy, and universities have come under quite a bit of stick recently from just there's a media narrative around the value of a degree versus the cost. So we're trying to look at it through the lens with our stakeholders in particular of how we're contributing to the government's industrial strategy in those 8 growth areas, and we can absolutely demonstrate that we are doing that. So that's one thing that we're trying to really focus on. And again, getting people in to see what we're doing and see how we're making a difference. and then how we're helping from a regional point of view contribute to the regional economy. I'll give you a good stat. Manchester Metropolitan University contributes more to the local economy than both Manchester United and Manchester City football clubs combined.
Really?
Absolutely. And this, you wouldn't know that. So we have to get that message.
My chips have just been dropped.
We have to get that message across, because we know we are a huge contributor, and it's such a role to play there. We've got to really capitalise on that. Yeah, all that's possible through having just that little bit of extra headspace, being able to, like I said, focus, look at, get back to basics in some ways, really unpick processes and the way that we're doing things and constantly improve them. Again, it's the dream of every comms person to constantly be reviewing what they're doing and making improvements, but genuinely having the time and headspace to do that. They genuinely put health and wellbeing front and centre, so that's been really refreshing, because there are still, it's still busy, and there's still things, sad incidents, there's still things that happen, systems fall down, students can't access things, there are reputational risks constantly being juggled. I've seen a handful of student deaths since I've been in the organisation. So you still get that, but it's sort of a bit easier to manage. Really robust processes in place to deal with those things, and as I say, it's there's a real culture of wellbeing in the organisation.
I mean, you said at the get-go that it's the university that you studied your degree at. And there must be something special about coming full circle, and you can tell from what in the last 5 minutes that the passion for the job and the place where you've landed is definitely there. Is it made that little bit more special because it's where you went as well? Yeah,
it really is. It's funny, you've kind of got almost like celebrity status when you say that you're an alumni or alumna. I've still not quite worked out. There's a Latin base to the alumni thing, which I've still not quite worked out. But yeah, you tell someone, oh really? And it's really nice. It's a nice conversation starter when you're new to the organisation, definitely being able to say that. It changed so much because it's such a long time since I was there. But it does, honestly, it really genuinely does feel quite special. But it's just, again, it's that connection to purpose that I was talking about. Firsthand having experienced the benefits of the experience and the education that I got there, the doors that having my degree from there opened for me in terms of my career. I've also reconnected with, very briefly, with the personal tutor that got me through my dissertation since I've started there, who's still there, which has been wonderful as well, who gave me my first reference and my first job as a journalist. So It's really, all the little pieces just have fallen in really nicely together. So yeah, it is actually really special.
Oh, excellent. Thank you, Sarah, for your time. Before we close, if you were able to kind of just reflect across your years in journalism, the fire service, and now in Manchester Metropolitan, what would be the key lesson that you would take away, or key lessons that you would...
How many am I allowed?
As many as you want.
I'd definitely say that understanding how to look after yourself and know it, and being open. Just be open with your team, with each other, and recognising it's okay to not be okay. Get the help if you need it. Talk to people, and just don't be afraid to be honest if something is affecting you, or if you're struggling, and ask for help. The other one, which again someone's probably told me this, but it's so true, is don't reinvent the wheel. Someone will have done it before you, so go and speak to people. Find out how they've done it before. Or yes, things might need reviewing and tweaking, but if you can spend your time on something else, go and have a look what's done before. And then the key one, I would say, is just don't stop learning.
Yeah,
there's so much changes in the comms world, as you know, especially in like a digital side of the world. You've got to be able to keep on top of those things, and it just helps you grow as a person, and it helps you grow with confidence. And you can be the type of person who throws yourself into it and signs up to a professional body, does all the CPD, does qualifications. Great. If that's not you, you can still embed it into your day to day. So sign up to all the newsletters. You go on LinkedIn. There's dozens of free things you can read, listen to, watch, and just embed that into your day to day and absorb as much as you can. And some of it you might not need, you might not agree with, you might not listen to. But if you just learn as much as you can, absorb it, you will then filter out which bits relate to you, and you will hold on to some really useful nuggets. And in terms of learning as well, just learning from yourself, learning from mistakes that you will inevitably make. That's okay, but just learn from it and go forwards and try and, improve things as you do. And I've got one more actually. Sorry, 4.
Oh, wait, I'll allow you one more.
Be curious. Don't stop being curious.
Yes.
Just ask the questions, dig a bit deeper. And that's how you get to those real stories. And
yeah, that really resonates in the room that you sat in, because it's one of our core values here at Viva. Always be curious, always be looking. So yeah, it's as though we planned.
I genuinely didn't know that.
And clearly, one of the ways that you can keep your mind ticking over is to be a subscriber to this podcast.
Absolutely.
Sarah, thanks. We could chat all day. It's been an absolute pleasure, but thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and sharing. It's been an absolute cracking episode. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to PR in the Real World. If you've enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you could subscribe to the podcast and leave us a quick review. Your support really helps spread the word and reach more marketing and PR professionals just like you. And don't forget to share this podcast with your colleagues or anyone who'd benefit from the insights we share. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time for more tips, strategies and real world stories from the PR frontlines.